Hello everyone. Welcome to the Nightmare Wicked Gesture channel of scary, true, creepypastas and more. I'll get right into it. I snuck out of my house at 14. You won't guess what I encountered. I was an 8th grader, 14 years old. I thought I already knew everything. Was already about 6'2" and 180 pounds, so I was a pretty good-sized kid for junior high. I played quarterback in football. Our junior high team went undefeated that season. I also played basketball. We were pretty good there too, but we were not perfect like football. And being the jock I was, the majority of the girls in my class and a grade below, heck, even some of the freshman girls had asked me out. I had to say no though, because there was this one special one that was in my class, and I'm pretty shy, but I knew it was puppy love at first sight. Her name was Jessica. While in class, I would sometimes just get into trouble for my class clown act trying to impress Jessica. Just about everybody laughed at my jokes and my smart-ass behavior, but with the expense of a trip or two to the principal's office. I was even suspended for a few days for calling the teacher a piece of shit. He was so mad at me one time, he had brought me out to the hallway, closed the classroom door, and said, "If you were my boy, I'd take you behind my woodshed for at least 30 minutes and whip you until you couldn't sit." I found it funny and had to reply, "Well, I'm glad you aren't my dad." He was so red in the face, trying to do everything he could to hold back from laying hands on me. Other than that, I had average grades. Wasn't very concerned with homework, as I was way more concerned about Jessica. But I was really shy and I didn't have a whole lot to say to her until right before 8th grade graduation. Then we finally talked, and finally I built up the nerve to ask her out. Feeling nervous about the response, she passed me a note right as the last school bell rang. Everyone had left the class and I was still sitting there, and a close friend of mine, his name was Jimmy, he came by and had to see what it said. So I took a breath and opened it. It had 3 giant letters, Y-E-S, and her phone number. Man, what a relief. I was stoked. I hurried on home excited as all heck. I asked Jimmy if he wanted to swing by, so he went with me, so we played a few video games until about 9 p.m. that night. He decided to stay over, as there's really nobody that likes walking home at night in this small town, as there wasn't very many streetlights, and it was just overall pretty creepy. And I lived on the edge of town, had about 3 neighbors around me. The town had a population of around 1,100 or so, real small town. It also had a large furniture factory right across the street, where the majority of the small town was employed. And across the other side of the street was a barbed wire fence that led to a road around a giant cornfield. And across that cornfield was Jessica's house. I could see it about 1 mile away, all the way across the crops when they weren't that high. There was also a fitness gym right up the road from her house, so I'd make up an excuse and run around the cornfield so I'd have a reason to pass by in hopes I'd see her. Her room was upstairs, the window facing the same direction as my house. We started hanging out. For the majority of the time, it was at her place. Her room smelled so good, and it was always like sweet perfume, and there were always candles burning in her room. But it was a comfy place to hang out and watch movies, or just lay in the bed together and hold each other. The first love, oh, there's nothing like it, huh? I had gotten into some trouble very early in the summer for smoking cigarettes with some friends, and the city cop had issued me and the friends MIPs. Boy, this pissed the old man off. "You're in sports, what the hell were you thinking?" he said. I didn't have any kind of reply, so being pretty upset, he grounded me for at least a month, and I couldn't go see Jessica anymore either. He even went to the extreme of taking away my phone privileges. This was the 90s, so we didn't have cell phones yet. She would try and call, and he would just say the same thing. "I'm sorry, he's being punished." And blah, blah. This pissed me off even more. Made me resent the old man a little bit even. I thought it was pretty extreme not letting me even speak with her. I stayed in the basement of the house. It had small windows that if you stood on the couch downstairs, you could hoist yourself up through the small opening and be outside. This is where I came up with the plan. Wait till the old man heads to bed, and I'll sneak out, walk the road right next to the cornfield in the pitch black dark over to Jessica's. I was crazy in love and had to see her, or so I thought. You know how it is, first love, and so on. It was about 11 p.m. at night. The house was quiet. I creeped upstairs up to the old man's room, and the door was closed. So I thought to myself, this is perfect. So I put on a black sweatshirt and black sweatpants so I could sneak easier. I went downstairs. I popped the window. It seemed pretty loud, but I didn't care. I crawled out. Once I made it out, it was like freedom. Almost like breaking out of jail. Ha! Not really, but it felt like it at the age of 14. I pushed the window partially closed and ran under the only streetlight in front of our house and into the darkness of the cornfield. The moon was out, so it provided a little bit of light, enough to see where I was walking anyway. I felt creeped out still right away within the first quarter mile, as it was super quiet out there, with the only sound was the corn leaves blowing in the gentle breeze. I started feeling anxious, so I decided to jog the rest of the way, trying not to think about what could possibly be lurking in the cornfield. I heard a few strange noises, but I just kept running. And before I knew it, I was coming up on her house fast. Her light was still on, thank God. I thought her parents seemed to be awake as well, because the downstairs lights were on as well. So I decided to grab a few small rocks and loft them up towards her window. Not hard enough, of course, to break the glass, just hard enough to maybe create a sound to make her aware that somebody was outside. First couple tosses, I hit the side of the house and thought, shit. And I ran behind an evergreen tree that was right in their yard, and I hid there for about 15 minutes waiting for her parents to walk outside and check what it was. But there was nobody. So I was in the clear. Walked back up and tried again, and jackpot. It clinked right off the window, and Jessica appeared. Quietly opened the window, and she was so happy to see me, as I was her. I wanted to see her so bad, so we chatted for a little bit, and I asked her if her parents were asleep, and she said they were, as it was about 1 a.m. now at this time. The coast was clear, so she came down and unlocked the back door, and we snuck up to her bedroom and fell asleep with each other till about 5:30 a.m. When I woke up, I then said my goodbyes and snuck back out of her house. It was starting to get light outside, and the old man had to leave for work by 6:30. So I was sweating it. I ran the whole way back. I was pretty exhausted now, and I quickly crept around the rear of the house to the window that I snuck out of, and yep, sure enough, it was closed and locked. I thought to myself, I didn't leave it this way, and oh crap, he must have checked on me or heard me and found out that I left and locked me out. I was still pretty exhausted, so I went to the garage quietly and crawled into the old man's SUV. I laid down, waiting for him to leave for work. With the anxiety I already had from him knowing I snuck out in the chilly morning air, I couldn't fall asleep for nothing. Then I heard the garage door open, and bam, the car door opened quickly. He was pissed, boy. He cussed me out and said, "You're going to work with me today, and you're going to wash all the company vehicles." He worked for a natural gas company, so it had at least a good 15 vehicles, if not more. I was already exhausted, and I just kept quiet the whole ride out there to his work, which was out in the country about half hour or so away. And man, he chewed my ass all the way out there. I just kept quiet, not really knowing what to say. It was a Saturday and his weekend to work, as the guys out there rotated weekend shifts. So this way he could take me out there to do the grunt work if I was ever in trouble, like today. He knew where I went and tried grounding me for longer, still without contact with Jessica. I told him, "You can't do that. I'll just sneak out again," I said. "I will see her. I love her." He didn't even respond. It was the longest Saturday of my life. I think I washed 8 or 9 vehicles at least, spotless, in the 8 hours that we were out there. I tried to hide out and have a little snooze, but he was on me like white on rice. That wasn't happening. So when I got home, I immediately went to bed. When he went to work the next morning, I called Jessica right away. She really wanted to see me again, and I felt the same, so we had made plans on me sneaking out again in a few days when things started to cool down. This time, I waited until midnight. and made my way out a lot quieter than the first trip. I crossed the road, I jumped the fence, and I was on my way. It was pretty light as the moon was full now. There was no wind, and I could hear the coyotes howling and yipping not far from where I was. I started feeling the anxiety once again because I wasn't sure if they would attack humans, but I sure in the heck didn't want to find out, so I made some noise as I walked to try and keep them away. As I was about halfway to her house now, that's when I heard the corn leaves start rustling like something was running through the cornfield in my direction. I immediately felt the fight or flight response go off, and I sprinted up the road. I wasn't even looking back. And then I could hear what sounded like it was a horse running after me. It was snorting and breathing heavily. It was loud and it was getting closer fast. So I was freaking out at this point, not wanting to look back and see what it was, but it started to sound so close I had to do something, I thought. My heart was throbbing out of my chest, so I finally turned around quickly, yelling out, "What?" And then that's when I seen it. This black shadowy figure looked about 8 foot tall, and it was wearing an all-black, huge cloak that had a hood on it, so I couldn't see any face or features, but I could see it had these long, grotesquely white arms with black claw-like fingers that were nearly dragging on the ground. Just abnormally, freakishly long it was. It was not human, that's for sure. I then screamed in horror, as I didn't know what else to do. Still being over 100 yards from Jessica's front yard, the thing then grunted and snorted, and it just took off as fast as it showed up, right back into the cornfield. I was shaken up pretty badly as I knew I had to make it to Jessica's and tell her just what I'd seen. I got to her house, her mom was awake and heard me throwing rocks at the window. She quickly ran outside asking what the heck I was doing there so late. I told her I just wanted to see Jess and that I just saw something otherworldly out in that cornfield, and she could tell that I was pretty shaken up. So she had let me hang out with Jess and spend the night. I didn't care if I was caught sneaking out. I wasn't gonna walk back up that road without it being light outside at least. So I just laid there wide awake holding Jessica. I was thinking what the heck that thing was, or the fact that my father was going to tan my hide for sneaking out again. I was in a catch-22. The morning came quick, as I had eventually finally passed out. It was 7 a.m. when I had woken up. I was groggy as all get out, but I had anxiety as I knew I needed to get home as soon as possible to not make Pops even more angry. I told Jessica I had to run, and she was already back to sleep from the long night. I had to ask her mom for a ride as I was uncertain if that thing was still around. Even if it was light outside, I was still very creeped out. The internet was super slow back in the 90s, but I had to try some research to see if I could come up with anything. After several hours of looking up some possibilities, there were some mysterious things in black cloaks that stood 8 foot tall. And the internet had given me a few stories of this happening to other people, but they weren't even in the same state. One was all the way across the United States, and the other was in Europe. But the way it was described, very tall, with no facial features, long arms, the both of them had said also that it was an evil presence, and they could sense that much. There was nothing good about this being. It did not harm them either, but it just stood there and stared at them. The damn thing, whatever it was, had chased me, and I was totally freaked out by this time. I for sure as heck did not want to encounter it ever again. And if I do somehow, or by mistake, I'll be sure to post my experience once again. Heck, I'll post even if I don't see it again just to say that I'm alive. Please, do not go out alone late at night, for there are things out there that are unknown.